Welcome back, horror fans. I'm Jay. This is Jay's VHS Rentals. The horror genre follows all these trends. You can see them through the decades. For example, in the 80s, it was slashers. In 90s, popular horror was very self-aware. We're now going through the 2020s, and the current trend appears to be public domain horror. YouTube is full of hot takes on this trend. The general consensus across all of YouTube is that this is terrible and it must be stopped. However, I'd like to propose an alternative take. But before we get into that, if you want to become a member of the VHS rental shop and borrow any of these lovely tapes behind me, you need a membership. The form is real easy. All you got to do is hit one button. Subscribe. Did you do it? Okay, let's get into this. Okay, before we go too far down this particular rabbit hole, we need to really understand what is at the heart of this issue. The public domain. So every character, be it from books, cartoons, comics, everything comes with a copyright timer. For most of these characters, it's 95 years. After that, ka-chow, anything can happen. See, after the copyright expires, it becomes what's considered the public domain. That means anyone, indie filmmakers, big studios, essentially anyone can go and use that character for whatever project they want, legally and without paying a cent. There are some rules, obviously there's a catch. You can only really use that initial version of the character. A good example of this is Mickey Mouse. You can use Steamboat Willie, the original appearance, but you can't use the well-known design with the gloves. The same applies for Winnie the Pooh. You can only use the version from the books. That's why all of these horror movie versions look slightly different, just different enough not to get sued into oblivion. So now you know, the public domain, basically a big toy box full of free assets that you can play with. And filmmakers spent zero time turning that toy box into a bloodbath. But why now? Well, copyrights used to expire sooner. However, an act was passed which extended the length of time before you could use them, which meant there was a huge period of time where nothing new fell into the public domain. That is, until Winnie the Pooh. So the first big name out of this new wave of characters dropping into public domain was that silly old bear Winnie the Pooh. Now when this happened, they released a film called Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. And because it was the first time it happened, it got quite a lot of media coverage. The film itself is a pretty average, but definitely watchable, British slasher movie. The key takeaway though, is that it turned a profit. Obviously, it's natural to be curious about Winnie the Pooh and Piglet going on a killing spree. I mean, who doesn't want to see that? However, even a bear of little brain knows that a profit means only one thing, a sequel. And we got Blood and Honey 2. Not only did it have a bigger budget, we also got Owl and Tigger and a much higher body count. The continuity between the two films is a little bit confusing. Essentially, the events of the first film are the dramatization of what actually happened. And in the second one, a character is watching the first movie on TV. So it's a movie that exists within the canon of the second film. It's confusing, but it kind of works in the same way as Night of the Living Dead and Return of the Living Dead. Would you believe it? Once again, it makes a profit. And they announce a cinematic universe. The following year, the worst nightmare for Disney happened. Steamboat Willie hit the public domain. The first appearance of Mickey Mouse. Now, the bill that was passed, which extended copyright, was passed pretty much with the sole intention of protecting this mouse from the public domain. You can Google it. It's often referred to as the Mickey Mouse Bill, but that was only delaying the inevitable. And once he was public domain, low-budget horror makers, they acted like sharks smelling blood in the water. It was a frenzy. Within a matter of months, we got not one, but 3 movies based on the character. Literally rapid fire. We got Mickey's Mousetrap, which is a slasher set in an arcade. Mouse of Horrors. This one's in a fun fair with a mutant mouse collecting body parts. And Screamboat, which is actually on a ferry. That's about as a faithful adaptation of the source material as you're going to get though. The next big one to land in the public domain was a spinach-eating sailor by the name of Popeye. And once again, we got 3 very different takes on it. We got Popeye the Slayer Man. This one's a straight slasher set in an abandoned spinach canning plant. The prosthetic was really fun. I liked this one a lot. You've got Shiver Me Timbers, in which a sailor mutates into Popeye after accidentally smoking a chunk of Halley's Comet. The face is a CGI nightmare, but It's entertaining. And thirdly, there was Popeye's Revenge, which is another British slasher. This one involves a haunted cabin and a summer camp. Again, all of these movies came out like within months of each other. And while they vary in quality, I would actually recommend watching Popeye the Slayer Man. I enjoyed that one a lot. That said, I am biased and a fan of the character. I even enjoyed that Robin Williams take on it. So those characters are the big obvious ones that everyone was talking about. But there was something else running in tandem with this, and it's still childhood favourites. It's fairy tales. Now there are loads of these, but some of the ones that I want to flag out for you are Peter Pan's Neverland Nightmare, Bambi, and Pinocchio on Strong. I highlight these because those ones, along with Pooh and Piglet and Friends, are part of the Twisted Childhood Universe, or the TCU for short. And this is where we boil down to the real common thread in this trend. It's all about taking things which are from our childhood and things that should make us feel safe and then twisting them into something else. However, what's interesting about the fairy tales specifically is they've already been twisted into something safe. Most of these old Brothers Grimm stories were horrific to begin with. We softened them up around the edges, Disneyified them. Things like cannibalism, mutilation, infanticide, all normal plot points for those early fairy tales. And I think maybe this is where people are noticing it, but they're getting tripped up over these public domain characters and not focusing on the wider idea here. While the most noticeable and talked about variations on this trend are these B-movies, the wider trend is producing good films. An example of this is The Ugly Stepsister. Now, The Ugly Stepsister isn't a trashy B-movie. This is a well-received, well-reviewed piece of foreign language cinema that just happens to be a body horror. This isn't a movie just based on shock value, though. This is a movie making a genuine point about female beauty standards and the lengths that people will go to achieve them. Now, before you come at me in the comments saying, oh, one movie, that's just an exception, that proves nothing, there's another movie I want to talk about. So the final movie I want to talk about before we wrap this whole thing up and see if we learned anything is another movie that takes something from your childhood and twists it into a horror, The Banana Splits. Yep, those goofy mascots from the late 60s, they got a horror movie all the way back in 2019. This means this movie was released several years before Winnie the Pooh, the first big character that fell into public domain. And that's because this movie was not made because of a lack of copyright. The people that hold the rights to this wanted this movie to be made. Now, if you're not familiar with the Banana Splits, kind of think Barney the Dinosaur for the late 60s and early 70s. The plot of this one is that the mascots are actually animatronics and they're taping the final episode. Robots are not too keen about being taken off the air and they go on a bit of a rampage. I found this to be a really fun movie with some great practical effect kills. Wholeheartedly recommend that you watch it. Jordan, who made the intro music for this channel, actually lent me the movie to watch. So if you've watched this far into the video, say hi to Jordan in the comments. Now, it could be argued that this movie walked, so movies like Willy's Wonderland and Five Nights at Freddy's could run. There are some reports that suggest that the script was actually adapted from a disused Five Nights at Freddy's draft. So now we've established what the real trend is, I think it's safe to say that public domain horror is really just a rocket that's propelled this trend rather than the actual trend itself. It's not something that didn't exist before. Like, we've had movies about killer clowns for years because it's something that is safe from our childhood, twisted into something scary. However, having this new wave of characters every year or two is perpetuating this trend and will continue to. It's only a matter of years before characters like Batman, Superman and the Joker's first appearances will all become public domain. Now, I said towards the beginning of the video that public domain horror is something other YouTubers have said must be stopped. Do we agree with that? Honestly, for myself, no. I think all of these low budget horror movies being able to turn a profit and create jobs for people and perpetuate the horror movie industry is something that should be celebrated and not stopped. It's wonderful. Obviously, it helps that I am probably the target audience for these types of movies, but movies making money means more movies get made, and I just can't find fault with that. Let me know in the comments, what characters you want this trend to twist into nightmares next. It's not long now until Betty Boop becomes public domain, and I can see that working. But if I could pick anyone, like anyone, Shrek. Well, that's my thoughts on the topic. If you want more horror movie videos posted every week, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Until next time, I'm Jay. This is Jay's VHS Rentals. Be kind and rewind.